Well, nationally, new polling from the New York Times and Siena College found the race tied at 47% nationally. That mirrors some other recent national polls, suggest very little change since last week's debate. Here to discuss the state of the race, Republican strategist and CNN political commentator Michael Singleton, and Taryn Rosenkranz, CEO and founder of New Blue Interactive. I want to begin, if I can, with some news, right? And you're aware of this. There's been a lot of talk about a story coming out, and now it is out, regarding the GOP nominee for governor in the state of North Carolina, Mark Robinson. This reporting coming from CNN's K-File, that is Andrew Kaczynski, in which the GOP nominee said, "I am a black Nazi," that among dozens of disturbing comments on Porn Forum. In advance of that story, Robinson came out to insist he's staying in the race. Sure, Michael, if I could begin with you, does this kill his chances of, he was already behind in most of the polling, does this kill his chances of being the governor of North Carolina?
Yeah.
And how does it weaken Trump, I should say, as well, in North Carolina?
Yeah, look, I was just skimming through the article, and it's definitely going to be problematic for a lot of evangelical voters in North Carolina. His campaign stated that he's not getting out. I believe he has until 11:59 p.m. to get out. I was texting with some folks on the former president's campaign. I think they are likely going to try to potentially push for him to get out of this race. North Carolina is now competitive now, Jim. We've reported on that fact on our very network. The last thing you want with all of Donald Trump's interesting prognostications, if you will, the last thing you want is another candidate further dragging down the ticket when you already have a candidate who can be a little difficult sometimes. And so I think the best thing here for Republicans and for the GOP is to push him out and try to find someone else who's more palatable, who can potentially increase turnout, particularly with suburban voters where Republicans are absolutely struggling.
Taryn, Robinson has already been polling behind Trump in North Carolina and has put North Carolina in play in a way that it really hasn't been since Obama won it in 2008. One, do you think North Carolina actually is in play for Harris? And what effect do you think this story about Robinson would have, not just on him, but on Trump's chances in the state?
Well, it's interesting because Mark Robinson has been a continued disgrace throughout this campaign. This is not the first nor the last of disgraceful and just horrific behavior by him over and over again. So this is just a continual drag on the ticket for Trump. But it just also is a theme. I mean, it's really hard. You talked about evangelical voters here and people of faith, right? And just people who are just sort of sick and tired of this rhetoric and this extremism and this just so far from, families of faith and families who just don't want this, right? We want something that is just calm and just a return to sanity. And this is just so far from that, right? And this is just not going to be what families are looking for. And so I just think this is going to be really hard for Trump to separate himself from. And you've got Kamala talking in a way that is relatable to families who are looking to find ways to lower costs at the grocery store and to find ways to keep their kids safe at school. And this is just not that. I'm a black Nazi is not that. And I think it's going to be really hard for folks to not see that.
And we should know Trump himself not only endorsed Robinson, he used the phrase to describe him, an MLK on steroids. Those were Trump's words.
Right.
I want to talk about other polling because beyond the national polling, there's been some good battleground state public polling for Kamala Harris in recent weeks, including in the Blue Wall, where Quinnipiac, it found that Harris was gaining ground on two of Trump's best issues with voters, immigration and the economy. Sure, Michael, do you see this race moving in Harris's direction in key battleground states?
I see the race having improved substantially from where it was when President Biden was the top of the ticket. And I understand why. I mean, a lot of Democratic voters writ large really didn't have the confidence, Jim, that the president could win again. And so here comes Vice President Harris. She's a woman of color. She's younger. She brings a lot of enthusiasm. And you're seeing that in the massive amount of money she's raised and the massive number of volunteers that have signed up across the country to support her candidacy. However, when you begin to look down beneath those top line numbers, you do see some potential vulnerabilities for the vice president, particularly with men. I'm seeing vulnerabilities with African Americans, generally speaking. I think one poll that just came out from Howard University today suggests that she's around 82%. She needs to be around 90 to 92%. So she has a lot of room that she needs to make up for there. Though she has increased her margins on the economy and immigration, and voters appear to sort of be giving her an interesting pass, unlike the pass they were willing to give President Biden, she still is marginally behind Donald Trump. Now, the question, Jim, for Trump is, can he become disciplined enough to not only bring his critique of immigration and the economy of the Biden-Harris White House, rather, can he turn that critique to a more palatable, forward-looking vision for how he would address those issues? So far, I don't think he's figured that out, which is why I do think the vice president still has more room to grow. But look, I want to withhold judgment and give the former president an opportunity to see if he can sort of change things around a bit.
Sure, Mike, I have to smile and nod my head a little bit at the more disciplined exhortation, just because I've been hearing that for a decade, right? And as you're saying that, Trump is still talking about a lie of Haitian immigrants eating pets in Springfield. I just before I go back to you, Taryn, do you think that's realistic? Basic question.
So look, Jim, I'm a strategist, right? And I'm looking at this race and I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm saying if this were my candidate or a different candidate, this is the outcome or this is the playbook that I would advise that I think would give that Republican an advantage. Now, whether or not the former president would heed my advice or the advice of those individuals who he's paying to run his campaign, that's a separate conversation.
Yes.
And I think history suggests that, he doesn't always take that advice.
Taryn, I want to ask you, because to Shermichael's earlier point, Harris, again, based on the polling, and polling is not entirely predictive, losing some ground, certainly with white men, losing some ground in some polling with black men and Hispanic men, gaining a lot of ground with women, blacks, and also, well, it appears Hispanics, but certainly young people. Based on your read of the race right now, do the areas where she's gaining outweigh the areas where she's losing in terms of rebuilding, well, if you want to call it the Biden coalition that won in 2020?
I think so. I mean, I think the debate was so interesting. I mean, I know debates don't win campaigns, but I do know just even the buzz in the street here, the mainstream ability for him to appeal to people, to your point about eating dogs and cats, right? Like there was just some point where I think that many moderate and independents were like, wait, what did he just say? He seemed a little bit unhinged. And I think that just took a lot of people to take a step back. And I know that many independents and sort of folks were like, wait, I'm not sure I can do this time. And I think that where she gained a little, I'm going to say a little bit more momentum for folks was there, right? Like, because those coalitions for folks who felt maybe a little bit more comfortable voting for him last time, they just couldn't see themselves doing it in the same way because he just seemed a lot more unhinged, quite honestly. And they were having more trouble seeing themselves doing it again. And he brought age into this debate. He brought age really as a core focus. And when Biden was off the table, this has now become an issue that is at the forefront. And he made himself appear quite not in the same way that he was. And he's really brought this issue to the table. And when you seem unhinged and you're not seeming in the same way, I think it's really going to be a little bit more of an issue for him.
Well, we'll see if he listens. We'll see if he listens to Shermichael.
Jim, I was going to say really quickly, I just think that's a great observation by Taryn, right? Like some of those moderate voters, some of those moderate Republicans, maybe they were thinking like, okay, if Trump just gives a good performance here, maybe I don't agree with some of his pronouncements, but if it's just enough, I'm willing to vote for him. That's where I think the real vulnerability for the former president is. He has a slight advantage on the issues, but it's the question of the chaos that turns off a lot of voters that he has to figure out a way to address.
All right, Shermichael Singleton, Taryn Rosenkranz, thanks so much to both of you. Just after the break, Jim.